Hola, ¿cómo están todos? Mi nombre es Román Jaques y en el video que van a ver a continuación... I'm so sorry, I switched languages. Yes, because in this video we will be dealing with triggering a change in your application's locale via RiverPod. Ready to take your application global? In this episode, we will be diving in the world of localization and also learn how to empower your users to choose their preferred language. With RiverPod, changing your application's language is a breeze. We will create a provider to store the default language, listen for changes when the user switches from one language to another. We will be only localizing this application into English and Spanish, but you can use it with any number of languages. And seamlessly update the entire application's UI. Get ready to build applications that speak your user's language. Literally. And as a reminder, as always, if you end up liking this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any upcoming Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. Y con esto, manos a la obra. Let's get started. All right, everybody, so let's wrap it up by implementing localization into this application. So what we're going to do is we're going to be able to switch from Spanish to English and vice versa. We're going to create like a little toggle right here, and then that toggle, you're going to be able to switch between the two languages. By default, we're going to go with English, and then people can switch it back to Spanish. We're going to install some of the dependencies right now, and then you're going to see how we bring it to fruition. But first, let's fulfill the dependencies. So what we're going to do is in our project, let's bring it up right now. Remember, we are really well on our way to finalizing this project, but I hope that you guys are enjoying it. What we're going to do now is implement some of the, add some of the dependencies that are needed by the application for localization purposes. So the first thing is you need to install the international package. You need to add Flutter localizations, and you also need to add the generate property in the pubspec.yaml so that you can do the generation of code for the localization strings, and then you can import them into your application. So the way that you do it is, so I'm going to just grab it from a pre-configured pubspec.yaml that I have, and you can just, for example, do it like this. You can add into your pubspec.yaml, you add an entry called Flutter localizations. You have to have a subproperty called SDK Flutter, and you add the internationalization package like this. You also need to scroll a little bit lower right before the assets and whatnot, and then right here when you say where it says Flutter, you need to type the word generate equals true. If you don't do this, like the application blows up and then it doesn't do the proper generation of code for your particular case. Like if you want to do some of the localized strings, and from those localized strings, you want to generate some code that you're able to tap into like the locale, you can pull the strings and whatnot. You need to have these values in there. So I added the Flutter localizations, the internationalization package. As of the recording of this video, this is the latest version, so you should be updating it to the corresponding version that pertains to you. And then now what you do is after you install those dependencies, the way that I do it is I create a folder under my lib folder and I call it localization, or the common abbreviation is L10N, like for localization. Inside of that localization folder, you usually add all your ARB files. The ARB files are those particular files that contain all your localized strings that you're going to consume within your application, and you create one per language. So the way that I do is I create one file, app_en.arb. That's for English. And then if you add another one, you do app.es.arb for Spanish. For every single language that you're going to localize your application into, you should have an ARB file. I already have the strings that I want to localize my application into. So I have, for example, like all these labels. I have like provinces. I have also like the regions and whatnot. So those are the things that I'm going to localize. The provinces will stay the same. So I don't need those. They don't get localized. Only the things that pertain to my application. So I'm going to bring those right away. I already have them somewhere here on the side. These are for English, and then let me bring the ones for Spanish. So you should be able to match those one to one. Otherwise your application blows up and gives you an error. So these are the labels that I want to match from my application that I want to correspondingly display in English or Spanish. So after you have that, then you can start doing some auto generation that is required by the localization package. So I'm going to open up another terminal, and the way that you do it is at the root of the project, you type flutter gen-l10n. By doing this, you're actually generating some code in your application bundle that is going to be handling like some of the underlying intricacies of pulling the corresponding locale, the corresponding localized strings based on your locale. Now with that created, you need to create a couple of other hooks that will allow you to read the locale, set the default locale, and whatnot. Now you should be able to follow the pattern that we've been following. You create a RiverPod provider that then holds either the default locale and the one that you're going to be able to update the state of, and then the application reacts to that change and rebuilds itself. So let's go to the providers as always. And then here in the providers, I'm going to be creating one small class that we're going to be using kind of like to instantiate both of the locales that I'm going to be supporting. I'm going to call it class support locales, and then two static constants, one called, let's say I'm going to call it en, and then this is going to be locale en. You pass the language code, and then you pass the country code like this. So this is for the English, and of course I need one for Spanish, and this is the way that it looks. So you have now one for English, one for Spanish. Now with the support locales class in there, now I want to create a provider that wraps the value of the locale supported by the application at any given time. And it needs to be governed, and it needs to be controlled and be tracked of by RiverPod, of course. So I'm going to be creating a RiverPod provider for this. I'm going to call it class app locale extends _ $app locale. Very similar like before. And now I'm going to override, of course, it already gives me kind of like the suggestions on how to do it. So it's going to be a locale. By default, I'm going to use English as the locale, and I'm going to have one property called update. That update property is just going to get the value that I provide to my application, and then is going to react accordingly. It's going to rebuild the application using the corresponding strings that it picks up from there. So I need to, of course, reset the build runner. I need to delete some of the already generated files. So I'm just going to do it again. I should be good with my application. Let me make sure that I have one instance of the application. Okay, perfect. So it's still, we need to, of course, kill the application, start it back up. But while that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some of the hooks that I told you about that you need to do to support default localization. So because we already created that app locale provider, let's also get it from here. So I'm going to do final, select locale, selected locale, and I'm going to also watch for that. So ref.watch, and then I think I called it app locale provider. That's okay. App locale provider is going to give me that selected locale for the one that I've picked up, right? And now you need to add a couple of hooks in here. So one of those is, of course, the property called locale, and then that is the one that you're going to pass the selected locale. You also need to pass it a localizations delegate. So you need to incorporate it in here, in which you tell the application what are the locales that are supported. I'm going to feed this in a different way. So I need the localizations delegate. I need this one, and I'm going to pass it as a const. And here is where I'm going to say app localizations. So you need to bring it kind of manually. Sometimes it doesn't get picked up. So all you need to do is just import the package Flutter Gen 10 app localizations, and then you should be good to go. So we already set the locale. Depending on where you switch it, the application will rebuild accordingly, and it will pick up the selected locale. You need to select the localizations delegate because it's going to be using that to kind of like broker the communication between your application and the services that kind of query it. And now you need to provide also a locale resolution callback. A locale resolution callback, what it does is actually handles when, let's say, if your application doesn't have the locale set up, it's just going to grab whatever is, let's say, the default in our particular case, which is English, is going to pick it up from the selected locale and is going to return it. And is going to set the default locale to be that. So we want to be, what do we want to be the default locale? English. And that is provided by RiverPod when the application bootstraps pretty much. And the one that kind of got added by us automatically a little while ago is actually supported locales, but you don't have to provide it manually. It's already given to you by this app localizations class, and then you just have to say dot supported locales. This actually gets created automatically for you when you do the generation. If you click on this one, look, it already gives you those 2 locales. It's already provided to you by that. So that's why I like to provide it from the app localizations and then keep it that way. I provide my own locales, but then I match it with the ones that I'm generated. So this is the way to go. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to save and I'm going to rebuild the application. Right now, you shouldn't expect anything displayed yet, but what we need to do is now create the widget that is going to be doing the flipping. And also we want to start consuming the application locale, the service that actually pulls the app localizations, and then I can consume it in the application, pull the strings and replace them accordingly. So let me run the application one more time. The builder is running because we're going to be creating a couple of other providers. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one provider that kind of gives you those app localizations. Like it's going to give you access to that generated code that gives you access to the localized strings that we provided earlier. So the way that you do it is you create a specific class that provides you with that functionality. So I'm going to go to the providers and I'm going to create it down here. So we're going to create a RiverPod class. It's actually more like a functional provider. So we're going to call it app localizations. And remember, you need to import it manually because sometimes it is a little wacky and it doesn't want to come back. So it doesn't want to appear. So you want to add it right up here before the part, add it to the import. Now you have, for example, app localizations. You call it app localizations, right? You feed the ref to it. And the way that you do it is you create an instance of app localizations, right? Because you're going to fetch it from the system. So you do app localizations. You can, if you want, you can add it inside a try-catch block, because in case that you want to pull a language that is not supported, you're going to default to something else. So I'm going to say app localizations, and then you have one specific method that is also provided to you by the app localizations, which is called lookup app localizations. Now you're going to read the one that is selected by the system, which is you're going to say ref.watch app locale provider. And then once you feed that into that, because you want to actually read this provider right here, you want to provide this, you want to read the value of that, of the app locale, like right here. And then you're going to, if anything happens, if there is an error, you can just say on Flutter error or on exception, something like this. Then you can say, okay, so the app localizations will actually be the English version. So I can just say app localizations en, which is, you can import it by just bringing in that reference as well, because you want to default to something. You want to default to the English version. Let me just bring it right over here. And the reason why this is failing is because I need to set up my builder one more time. Always keep an eye on your watch so that it actually gets generated correctly. Let's make sure that my app locale is being created correctly. Okay, so there it is. So now we rebuild and it's all good. So let's go back to the providers. Let's recap one more time. I created an app locale RiverPod provider that is going to hold the value of the current locale set by the user, whether they flip the value to English or Spanish. I'm going to provide a functional RiverPod provider that just returns the app localization instance from the system when I do lookup at localizations. I fetch it by the value that is selected by the user. Remember, RiverPod is holding on to this value, to this state. I query it based on that value, and if it doesn't exist, I'll just return English by default. So if I reload the application, of course, you still shouldn't see anything crazy because we haven't replaced it yet. Now we're going to take care of, let's say, replacing some of these values over here. So by default is English, but you want to, let's say, default to Spanish, for example. Let's try that. If I want to default it to Spanish, so I say ES, right? I say it like that, and then I bring the Spanish version, which should be this one. And also my locale should be ES. That way, now when I reload my application and I query for strings, the strings that will return will be the Spanish ones. So now let's go back to the application. They're still displaying in English. Now let me show you how you can query for those localized strings. You pull up your code, and then now you have this provider called App Localizations Provider. So this is the one that you're going to use to do exactly this. Let's start right here with the show label. So I'm going to look for the label called show only in my Dart files. And here it is. So this one, the way that you invoke that provider and then you query for those strings, this is how you do it. So you do final localization, ref.watch, app localizations provider. Of course, this needs to be converted into a consumer widget now, of course, because now we need to do that. Widget ref. Okay, perfect. Now that I have this lock reference, I should be able to have all those strings available to me. If I just come over here and say lock.show label, I think I already created a label for that. And if you reload, now you see that it says show in Spanish translates as mostrar. So I'm going to do the same thing as provinces. I'm going to replace that value in there. And you see that now I'm already starting to pick up some of those values right there. So if I look for provinces, I'm going to look for the English version. Here it is. And now I do the same exact thing. I already have the ref. So all I need to say is final lock ref.watch app localizations provider, and I can just find that exact string. And then I just replace it right here by saying lock.provinces label. And now when I reload, now I will see here, for example, the two values that are already correctly localized. Now let's go ahead and finalize the map assets, which are actually enumerations. They're not strings or something that I can just immediately replace, and they're generated automatically. So the way that I do it, the way that I handle it like this, so I'm going to be creating a specific provider that takes in that enumeration and just returns the corresponding localized version of that enumeration. So it should be very simple, very straightforward. So you're kind of creating like a little bit of a mapper provider. So here I'm going to say riverpod, and I'm just going to return a string, and I'm going to call my functional provider localized map assets, because I'm going to handle the map assets from the left widget. And then I'm going to say map assets asset. All I'm going to do here, and by the way, I'm actually going to say, because this is a functional provider, you have access to a ref instance. Actually, here I should have provided, here it is, ref. You have an instance of the ref, of that pointer, of that instance, and then you can query for other providers. Right from this provider, I'm going to query for the localization provider. So I'm going to say lock ref.watch app localizations provider. Now I can just do a quick switch that returns based on every asset that I have. I can just do all the assets corresponding to every single one of the map assets that I have. So I can do it like this, and now I can return for, if I pass seas, I return seas label, coastline label, and so on and so forth. Now, where would I use this provider? Remember, you use this provider wherever you have access to that ref instance. Let's go to the map assets list widget. Here, this is the map assets list. I already have access to even the localization right here, which is okay. But here is where I want to replace it. I'm hard coding every value using the map asset name, which is the string representation of the map asset enumeration. So now what I'm going to do is say, because here I am inside a consumer, I can just say ref.watch localize map assets provider, and then I pass the map asset right in there. So by doing this, now if I reloaded, I should be able to see the corresponding localized version for all of these in Spanish. Awesome, this is great. Let's do exactly the same thing for the region below, which are still part of the enumeration. I want to create a mapper for those as well. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to be creating also a river pod. And also it's going to return a string, and it's going to be called localized map regions. It's going to take a map, a ref, of course, a map regions region, and then I'm gonna do exactly the same thing. I'm even gonna copy this part right here because it's pretty much exactly the same logic. And then all I need to do is do a return switch of a region and return the corresponding localized label from that one. So I'm gonna do southeast, southwest. And of course, I'm going to use this localized map regions provider in my map regions list widget right here. And instead of saying region name, I say ref.watch, pass the localized map region. And now if I reload it, and then I should be able to see the left-hand side and the bottom ones are correctly localized. I think I need to localize this one that says all provinces as well. Let's do that one real quick. I think I already have the value and all of that. So in my provinces list, I go right down here. And instead of having this hard-coded, I already have a consumer. So all I need to say is just pass the localization. Do I have it right here? I think I have it up here. So I can do it from here. I can do it right here. And I say lock.allprovinces label. Let me reload. Perfect. It says todas las provincias, which is the localized version for all provinces, and it's all working well. You see my images, like some of these are still showing like Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea. I want to bring the corresponding image based on that locale. Remember where we actually did it here, which is still hard-coded. I think I hard-coded it to EN, all of them for now. Like right here, here it is. You see that it says EN. Now I'm gonna, because this is also a consumer widget, I'm gonna bring my final lock right here, ref.watch, and then I'm gonna say app localizations provider. So I wanna bring that specific, actually the language code. That is what I wanna bring. Not just one specific localized name, but that a country code. The country code is either EN or it's either ES, and I don't wanna hard code it. So instead of doing here EN or ES, all I'm gonna do is just interpolate the lock.language code. But instead of the app localizations provider, I actually need the locale, not the localizations provider. Here, I'm gonna rename this as lock provider, but then I'm gonna need a final locale, which is the ref.watch app locale provider, not the localizations provider, so I can pull the strings. I wanna pull the locale. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is, so with that locale in there, I'm going to scroll right back down and replace this EN by locale.language code. And now if I reload, I should be able to see the Spanish version of that image. And now it says Océano Atlántico, Mar Caribe, Isla Beata, like those versions. Now let's wrap it up by creating the widget that will actually flip those values between English and Spanish, and then that way we can see them both in real time being executed. So why don't we do that? So last but not least, I'm gonna be creating one more widget, and I'm gonna call it app lang switch. So I'm gonna create a new file. I'm gonna call it app lang switch. So it's going to be pretty much similar like the one that we had before for the theme. So I'm going to call it app lang switch. I'm going to import in the material. And in this case, I'm going to add it. If you see the design, I'm going to add it right next to the application theme. So I'm just going to add it right next to it. I'm going to create like a little, probably I'll create like a little row and just add them both next to each other. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Yeah, let's do that. So let me bring up the code. Let me go to the application right here. And then right where I have my app theme switch, I'm going to wrap this inside of a row. Let's wrap this inside of a row. Let's give it a spacing of 32 pixels in between. I have the app theme switch on one side. I'm gonna add the app lang switch on the other one. Awesome. And then now let's flesh out the app lang switch the way that I'm calling it. So this is going to be pretty much the same way. I'm going to turn this into a consumer widget because you want to also pick up changes and you want to read the value from the app locale from there. So I'm going to do widget ref. I'm going to be reading, remember the current locale. So I'm going to say current locale ref.watch app locale provider. And then what I'm going to do is just flesh out the rest of the widget so that it looks according to my design. I'll probably use the text theme as well. So I'm going to say text theme. I'll just say theme that of context text theme. Just like the other one, I'm going to create a padding widget, right? I'm going to add, of course, like, edge insets.all. I'm going to add it as a child. Same as before. I'm going to add like two icon, in this case, I'm going to add just two text widgets. One, I'm going to hard code these because these won't be localized. So one for Spanish, right? And then I'm going to do style, text theme, that headline small, and let's just keep it like that. I'm going to need one just like this for the English version, one for Spanish, one for English. And then in the middle, I'm going to add that switch button, right? So I'm going to add that switch. The switch is going to have as the value is going to be current locale. If the current locale equals to supported locales that English, that means if it's the English version is the one on the right, and if it's false, it's going to be the one on the left. We pick up the value when the user switches it. And all I'm going to do here, and just as before, I'm going to do ref.read. I'm going to read the application provider. And depending on whether it's depending on the value that I'm ingesting, I'm going to set the value of that app locale provider correspondingly. So let me save that. Let's reload. Let's come back over. And now you see that by default, of course, we're saying that is Spanish. And now if I flip it, it should flip to English. And if you see all the strings and even the images are actually switching to English, I'm going to flip my theme to light so that you could see it and it's still in English. I can flip this back and forth and you see how even the images, the labels on the left, the labels on the right, the labels at the bottom, they're all changing accordingly. And this is all thanks to the power of RiverPod. So I hope you guys enjoyed this short series of videos where I brought you up to speed in terms of RiverPod, how to actually consume data from asynchronous sources, from the internet, from maybe from an API, also how to make your application pop, how to make your application more reactive, more responsive, and actually, come to life when it comes to updating data. I hope you understand a little bit more about state management using RiverPod. Of course, you can use any other of those offerings out there provided by Flutter and from the community, but I just wanted to give you another perspective on how you can use RiverPod to create amazing, beautiful, dynamic experiences using Flutter and RiverPod with code generation. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please, you can watch the whole rest of the series, but please stay tuned for more videos coming from me as far as Flutter and some other topics. So make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to get notified of other videos related to this. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you all for your support, and I hope you enjoy this series. Thank you. And there you have it. You've officially leveled up your Flutter state management skills with RiverPod. We've covered everything from the basics to advanced techniques, and now you're well on your way to build amazing dynamic Flutter applications. Remember the key principles that we learned. Keep your UI in sync with your data, handle asynchronous operations with ease, mock your dependencies for reliable testing, empower your users with theme customization, build apps that speak your users' language with localization. But most importantly, remember to have fun and keep experimenting. RiverPod is a powerful tool that can help you build amazing, incredible Flutter experiences. So go out there, build amazing apps, and share your creations with the world. Happy coding! Hey everyone, I'm Roman. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on other Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media.